more than 250. That's where the number of mass shootings in the United States stands since the beginning of 2022. As members of the Uvalde community mourn and calls for gun reforms mount, will this time be different? We have new national NPR, PBS NewsHour, Marist Poll numbers. Then, what does it mean to be a leader? How can organizations be more inclusive? We're joined by the author of the new book, The People Value Proposition, who has advice on how to create change. This is Poll Hub. Let's get started. And hey, everybody. Welcome to Poll Hub. I'm Mary Griffith.
And I'm Barbara Carvalho.
And I'm Lee Miringoff.
Well, on Wednesday, victims of the Uvalde massacre and their parents spoke before a House committee on gun violence. The mass tragedies at Uvalde, as well as the spate of other mass shootings throughout the country, have reignited the debate over gun control, gun reform, gun violence. You pick your terminology based on where you stand on the political spectrum. But we, along with our partners, polling partners at NPR and the PBS NewsHour, did dive into the issue and speak to Americans about where they stand on gun violence and gun reform. Barb, what are we seeing in terms of the numbers? I mean, is this really going to make a difference, these recent shootings?
Well, I think one of the things that I was really struck by in our most recent poll is we also asked the question about the proportion of Americans who either have been or know someone who's been a victim of gun violence. And that was 38%. And what I think was really striking is that it was the similar proportion, actually, I think the same proportion as it was in 2018. So I think one of the things that many Americans are struggling with is that we are in what seems to be a steady state that none of us really want to be in, as you mentioned, regardless of where you are on the political spectrum. You think that something is wrong. We certainly agree. There is a significant consensus. Americans want the issue of gun violence, gun safety prioritized, even over protecting gun rights. 59% of Americans want to control gun violence. 35% say that gun rights should be the priority. 72% of Americans say that the recent mass shootings actually make them more likely to vote in November. I think what's really interesting is that that is a bipartisan feeling. I think it's mobilizing people on both sides. Definitely more so Democrats. 8 in 10 Democrats feel that this is a motivating factor for them as we face the midterms going forward. But there is a consensus also about the fact that Americans want actually two things. So we see things polarized. Republicans saying it's a mental health issue, Democrats saying it's a gun control issue. Well, actually, Americans agree with both. They want this. They want more funding for mental health issues. That they see that is something that has been a significant gap. There are lots of other things besides gun violence that we can point to because of the lack of funding and attention that has been given to mental health problems. But also they see that there are reforms that can be taken to stem the tide of these gun issues, or at least try to, and that goes with the simple things that have been talked about for ages, which are issues of background checks at gun shows or private sales and red flag laws. Certainly, there's a bipartisan consensus on each of those. Lee, I don't know if you want to weigh in because
I would just say that
a wealth of data.
Yeah, I would just say just quickly that I totally agree with what you're saying, that this is not a zero-sum game. We don't have to go one way or the other. It would be nice if Congress could find truly a bipartisan answer to this, which incorporates both mental health issues and also restrictions, sensible, common sense kinds of things. And the only other point I would make in this, there are facts to be brought to bear. And the United States factually is not doing well when it comes to guns relative to the rest of the country, the rest of the world, I should say. Other countries are doing much better and have other kinds of things. We have not tried the restrictions. Since the ban on assault weapons was let to lapse, during that period, there were fewer. Isn't it time that we maybe try something? Because what we're doing right now is not working, and there are ways of ensuring guns are not going to be taken out of the hands. We're not going to go, doing something to the Second Amendment that people don't want to have place to occur. But I think what people are telling us in the poll data, it's time to do something. And I just have to speak to the courage of the families who can think that any of us would be able to do what they were doing this week, going to Congress. 2 weeks ago, they're living in a small town in Texas, and now they're talking about their dead or injured children, before the body of the U.S. Congress, and to be able to do that speaks to their just the strength of these people. And so I'd be remiss not talking about that.
The families of the latest tragedy are certainly going above and beyond, but everything does come down to leadership. Today, we are joined by Dr. Stan Harris, MD, and author of The People Value Proposition: See One, Do One, Teach One, Lead. Thanks so much, Stan, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I am delighted to have this opportunity.
Now, with full transparency, you are not someone who is new to Marist College. You actually have a Marist College degree, I think a couple of them.
Degrees, yeah.
Yeah. And also you have been a good friend to the college and very active for the last couple of decades, also as a trustee to the board of Marist College, and involved in a whole host of important activities here at the college, including the Student Life Committee and the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. You come with a wealth of experience from the healthcare.
Barb, I was just going to interrupt and say, but most important was the lunch we had last week.
Oh, yes. We'll get to that, Lee.
Okay.
We'll get to that, Lee. But Stan comes with an incredible amount of experience from the healthcare sector. You have been an incredible leader in many different areas of the healthcare sector, starting with your stint as director of the Montefiore Comprehensive Healthcare Center, which was an ambulatory care facility in the South Bronx, all the way to chairman of the Blue Cross Blue Shield Association and National Medical Policy Panel. So Stan, you've done it all. You've probably seen it all. And you, with your new book entitled The People Value Proposition, tell us what does that mean? The people value proposition. What are you saying to us about leadership?
Well, thank you for starting there. I wanted to express to folks that when you talk about leading, you are talking about people, and that for a leader's purpose, they are, in fact, the ones who are responsible for those behind them, if you will. Mm-hmm. And in fact, I like to think of people as a leader's reason for being, the raison d'etre, if you will. And that, without them, you're just the one out front. And that you don't lead computers, you don't lead robots, you program them, you lead people. Mm-hmm. And so with that in mind, I wanted to emphasize to all those who are interested in leading that you need to focus on the individuals, that you need to see that there is potential value in each of them. And that when you see that value, you need to acknowledge it and to do all that you can to help it develop. Because indeed, those are the ones who will be continuing the legacy that you are creating as a leader. they are the ones who will be part of a perpetual cycle of leadership.
Mm.
And that, to me, relates to the part of the title that says see one, do one, teach one. So that when you are, and that comes directly from my medical training and that of, thousands of others. But it was a classic statement that we would experience throughout our training. And I thought it was so applicable to what I think leadership is about. And I think it is what has the focus on people. And so the people value proposition says, if you invest your time and energy in seeing, acknowledging, and developing the value of others, that you will indeed create a perpetual cycle of leadership.
Mm.
And that I think is a major part of what I was saying.
Well, your book is a semi-autobiographical in the sense that it is a journey. It is your journey as a doctor, and you have an amazing story. I think one of the things that I was taken with in the book is your discussion about, are leaders born or are they made? And I think that I think your story is a classic example of some of the insights that you have on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yes, and that is another one of the principles that I hope anyone who reads the book would come away with, that we all can come from varied backgrounds. Very few are fortunate enough to inherit the leadership of an organization and come in at the top. So let's focus on how do we help people progress through their lives to get to the point of leading.
Did you think of yourself as a leader?
For a long time, it was not something that I had a very conscious awareness of. And I point out in the book that, when you go back as far as high school and see that there were times when you had opportunities to lead, when you perhaps didn't take advantage of it, perhaps because I was not confident that that was what I should be doing. Yet also within that time frame, there were opportunities that did come my way, so that I ended up being a president of the class and captain of a football team. So those were some initial examples of early leadership. But again, it's not the kind of thing that you can readily incorporate as this is what you're going to be doing the rest of your life, is leading someone somewhere somehow. I think it's really a question of now, as you've gone through most of your life, that you can reflect on these different periods and begin to pull it together.
Mm. Well, clearly, the book was not anything you could have written 40 years ago, because it really draws so much of from a semi-autobiographical basis. One of the things that I have to share, that when we had Stan, when you were at our lunch last week with our office staff, where people just came away with so many different things they could relate to what they do at the Marist Poll. But what I learned is that we both share a upbringing in Poughkeepsie, and that we both, you remind me of Joe's Pizza down by Riverview Field, which I think was probably the most important part of one of the big things, places that I frequented growing up. But you mentioned that you used to chase baseballs from Riverview Field. Could you just retell that story, because it was really very good?
Yeah, well, as a kid, I lived really 2 minutes away from the baseball field. And so when they were playing baseball, it was, I think, called the Industrial League, where a lot of the different manufacturing organizations in the city had sponsored baseball teams. So these were men playing baseball. So whenever there was a foul ball that came over the fence out onto the street, I, along with some of my peers, would chase the ball down, bring it back, and depending upon how far away from the field it had gone, we would get a dime or 15 cents or a quarter. And so we would bring the balls back, get the money, but unfortunately, I never was able to keep any of the money because before I got home, I would always stop at Joe's pizza stand and spend it on pizza. So, that was one of the truly enjoyable aspects of my childhood. That
Yeah. And you talked at the lunch about so many formative things that occurred. What what do you attribute most before you actually got to the point where you were in med school and became a doctor from that early period, so-called formative years? What do you think was the ingredient that you now see as having been so so shaping of who you became?
I think that from high school, when I in my senior year was voted the most respected, and it is then in retrospect something that was a key part of the way that I like to believe I tried to function throughout my life, that it was important to respect others. And in doing so, you also were able to establish a level of trust with them. And from there, you had the ability to go on and accomplish certain things with them. And I think those kinds of things were ingrained in me from that period of my life, and became an unrecognized but yet functional part of my personality and who I was and how I was going to progress through life. And so that, I think, was probably one of the important periods. I think another, apart from all the opportunities that I had to lead, came once I received a degree in organizational communication and leadership, because then I had the opportunity to reflect on leadership and to reflect on what had been important to me, who had been important to me, and how, and where I had positive influences and negative influences, positive motivations and negative motivations, So all of those things began to come together after that. And then finally, I think having the opportunity to give multiple presentations on leadership, particularly at the level of the Emerging Leaders Program at Marist, as well as within other businesses and organizations outside of that. All of those things, I think, came together in my later years to be able to say, now these things have a certain relevance to me. And it goes even back to what Barbara, I think, was alluding to earlier, that in my training, when I talked about our leaders, born, is it the nature-nurture issue in terms of how people develop? And I, in the book, reflected on, in my psychology, child psychology segment of my training, had the opportunity to see children interacting with one another in daycare programs. Okay, so I'm not even talking about into elementary school yet. This is daycare. And the differences were very interesting to see. And to see that in an affluent community, it was very clear that there were individuals who either identified themselves as the alpha member of a group, or that they were in some way leading the others. And within that same setting, I would see the ability of even individuals in early childhood thinking that there are other ways to solve problems, so that in the sandbox, there's a different way of resolving the issue than it was in other exercises within the school. So all of those things contributed to the knowledge of what you think about in terms of the need for valuing people, the need for something that gives individuals a different way of looking at leadership beyond a cookbook approach.
Well, and one of the things I find fascinating about the book is it's not a physician's, top 10 steps to becoming a good physician. It's a lot about organizations, but it's really about life and culture and broader issues.
And how to deal with people. Let me just reiterate that the book is The People Value Proposition: See One, Do One, Teach One. And you alluded to the See One, Do One, Teach One before. Stan, tell us what that means in terms of leadership, because it really resonates.
As I said in the book, it grew out of my training as a physician. And in medical school, there was no course called Leadership 101 or Team Building 102. It was what you did in real life. And that's when I first heard the term See One, Do One, Teach One, said by a resident who, at the time I was a student, was instructing us on how to do a spinal tap on an infant. And so it was myself, an intern, a nurse, and the resident. And the resident was very respectful, very cognizant of the multiple responsibilities that he had at the time, so that it was not only taking care of the child, but also making sure that others knew what was happening, that they understood the importance of what had to be done, and that recognizing everyone had a role, everyone had something to contribute, something to learn. And so it says, see what I'm doing, okay? Because the next time you're going to do it. And then after that, we expect that you will teach someone else to do it. And so I thought that was so indicative of what we see in real life when we talk about leadership. It is, I learned to do things a certain way. I want to help others do things that I think are the right way to go about doing it. And then I want you to be able to do the same for those who are coming behind you.
And you talk so much in the book and about the need for greater inclusivity, not exclusivity, inclusivity, and obviously that's a guide for professional communities, organizations, and society. What's the takeaway on how we can become, as an organization or a society, just more inclusive than we are?
I think the important thing is, number one, insisting that everyone matters. Number two, that everyone is of value or potentially has value. Okay. And that you need to think in terms of diversity, but diversity means inclusion, and that inclusion means equity. In other words, just saying that we have someone of a different, whatever you want to define them as different, as part of the organization. It also means that not only are they different, but they come with a different perspective, that they may come with different sets of experience and knowledge, and that we are going to give an opportunity for that knowledge, that experience to be incorporated into our organization. With those kinds of things, you're able to then be an organization that is building these concepts into what you would call a culture, and that it has to be something not written, not something that you expound in a speech or an advertisement, but rather something that is experienced.
Yes.
Something that is experienced by either the people who are working within it or people who come in contact with it, so that in those instances, they know what the culture means to an organization because they experienced it and it was real. Okay.
You talked in your book about your experiences and also all the mentors that you had. There's such a dearth of leadership. In fact, many organizations point to that as one of the most important issues of how we develop that leadership. Is there something that each of us should be doing, not necessarily even in organizations, but just in our lives in general, to foster this kind of leadership in children, in young people, in the folks that we come across in a variety of different situations?
I think so. I would think the first tenet would be we need to show, not tell, what it is that you want people to do, to follow, to be. So that would be my first tenet. I would think other key pieces are being able to take every opportunity to engage the individuals that you want to lead. It's not just enough to have a huge town hall meeting. That you need to take advantage of every opportunity you have, whether it's in the elevator, in the hallway, in the cafeteria, to let people know that you see them, that you are willing to take a moment to engage them, to listen, to understand, to empathize with them. Because when you're capable of doing those things, you then have the opportunity to really motivate individuals because they know it's not just the person standing up at the podium, but the one who's standing in front of me in this brief moment that we have to interact with each other. So that to me are some of the key elements, because when you've done those things, you are connecting, you have the opportunity to communicate, and when you have the real communication capability, you can then direct, and with a direction, you have the opportunity for progress. So I see those things as related in that way, key elements of leaders and how they relate to people.
Yeah, I know Barbara and I, we talked about this in the beginning, and we'd be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about what's on all of our minds right now, what's going on in the nation, and specifically after Buffalo and Texas. And you as a pediatrician, had to have just all kinds of anguish over what went on at the schools. Sandy Hook touched a nerve, and this has been, something that, what are you reacting to when you feel about the absence of leadership, the need for our culture to reach out, and then what's been going on in terms of these mass shootings, especially of the kids?
Yeah. As I've said in some areas of the book, and as a pediatrician, as a parent, when you can look at a historical line that says this is not the first time that we've seen our children destroyed. And my mind goes all the way back to Emmett Till.
Of course.
You know, and I can't imagine what the physicians who were trying to care for the victims of the most recent shootings to recognize the fact that a child was so badly damaged you could only identify them by their sneakers. I mean, I've seen too many things done to children over my lifetime that defies imagination. And when you try to put that in the context of a nation and you ask the question, what does it take? What does it take to say we need to protect our children? We need to protect our grandparents, our parents, our cousins, everyone who is impacted by these events time and time again. And yet we have become so politicized that it has paralyzed us as a nation that should be responding in a way that any parent would respond when you say, what do I need to do to protect my children? What do I need to do? And so I am as troubled as many others as to what possible catastrophic event or what meaningful issue would move people to say we have to do something definitive to change this course. And that is where I am at this point in time. It is so difficult to think about what we are experiencing as a nation, that we still are paralyzed. And I only hope that our political process is one that says, let's get people in positions of decision-making who will take the value of our children and our families as a primary concern. And, you know, short of having an invasion by aliens, it seems like that would be the only kind of threat that would make people feel that I have something to lose. Meanwhile, your children are gone.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Stan. We appreciate very much your insights. We have been the recipients of your thoughtful leadership. And the book is a wonderful read. The People Value Proposition, See One, Do One, Teach One, Lead. And you will come away from reading this book a different person. Because it will give you insights not only into leadership, but into yourself and into others. So Stan, thank you very, very much for joining us today and sharing some of those insights. But I really encourage people to take a look at the book, because it's incredibly insightful and something we really need today.
Well, thank you all. I truly appreciate it. Yeah, you're so wonderful. Thank you.
That'll do it for this edition of Poll Hub.
Poll Hub is a production of the Marist Poll at Marist College in Poughkeepsie, New York.
Mary Griffith is our executive producer.
Casey Schaff is our production supervisor.
If you enjoy Poll Hub, please consider leaving a review. Positive reviews help other listeners like you find us.
If you'd like to learn more about polling and survey science, check out the Marist Poll Academy. our free online learning portal.
If you have questions for us, tweet them directly to @Marist Poll.
Remember, you can always tell your smart speaker to play Poll Hub, and with any luck, it will cooperate.
Finally, wherever you listen to Poll Hub, there is a subscribe button.
Click it, and the latest episode will be ready for you in your podcasting app as soon as we release it.
We'll see you next time.